Hey yo guys, I'm back here to give you my thoughts on the recent a couple of news items that have happened over today in the past couple of days that I've been able to give you my thoughts on. The first thing, which I think is pretty damn big considering the names involved and the certain conflicts that two of these individuals have had together, or maybe even all of them as a whole have had, would be the Hulkamania Promotion, which is Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff's finally launching of an idea which had been in the works for about 4 years, and really, I guess one of the plans was to take the Hulk Hogan Celebrity Championship Wrestling show, which got aired on CMT and Much More Music here in Canada, and they were going to do touring of that, but it really didn't look like it'd pan out. That wouldn't draw, so they finally got up a promotion started, and now they got one of the biggest names in the history of the business in Ric Flair, which I find very interesting. Obviously the fact that Hogan and Flair are going through a lot of big divorces, and the fact that Flair with a lot of contracts, and he owes some people money as well, and Hogan with his whole Linda Hogan lawsuit, which is pretty fucking big, having to come together, which I find this big considering Eric Bischoff is also involved, and we all know that Flair and Bischoff really don't like each other, due to stemming with their conflicts back in, Bischoff when he was out of control in WCW. So I find this to be, a really big thing. Flair got WWE's blessing, basically like, look, I don't know, we don't have any real plans for you. Sure, go do it. I don't think WWE will be too upset about this. Like right now, it's only going to be doing a 4-show deal, and that's in Australia too. I believe right now wrestling is pretty hot in Australia. It's one of the most places in the world where it's hot. It's really hot right now in countries in Europe that wrestling isn't big in, like Spain, Portugal, countries like that, and now in Australia being another one. So I think that's another key aspect. Plus the other key aspect of how the success of the Hulkamania thing is going to be in Australia is the fact that Hulk Hogan's never been to Australia on tour, or he's never been there in general, I believe. So I think that's going to be something that makes it successful. I think it's going to have a couple. Right there, it's going to look good, but obviously, I think people may want to see, Hogan and Flair together here in, North America. I think that can, do pretty well. I think that, with the independent show that both guys were on for when Reed Flair had his first match, Reed Flair and David Flair versus the Nasty Boys in that, I believe it was in Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina, somewhere like an indie show there. It was one of the more successful indie shows in recent memory that I can think of, especially since like a lower indie show. That I think that's a big deal there. That's something that they're probably going to look at is expanding, and for sure there's going to be a TV deal. Is actually part of this deal was Hogan and Flair now have their own reality shows based off this, two divorced men, and they're trying to get their lives together and stuff like that. So that's going to be a big thing that helps. But yeah, I was more just shocked because of Bischoff and Flair working together. We all know that they don't like each other, but hey, when business is business, and you need money, and both men need money, let's go to these opportunities there. And I think some of the other interesting thing is that this Hulkamania Promotion's looking at trying to potentially get Jeff Hardy, that's right now I think that's maybe a bit too soon, but hey, he's a name and he draws anywhere. When you look at his history, I mean, he's always been a guy with a big drug history, but WWE or TNA very interested in the man, so you can't hate on them for that. I don't know if right now he's going to be making the jump right away, as he's got to deal with this recent drug incident. But I think if he if he just signs on, that's a real big thing, because then you have a older audience niche and with the Flair and Hogan's, but then you got the younger guys with a Jeff Hardy there, obviously, and some of the other guys that they're potentially like bringing in are like Umaga, Rikishi, Gangrel, basically a bunch of the ex WWE or TNA guys that they use over in Portugal and Spain for the for Rikishi's NWE promotion. A bunch of those guys, you can definitely see them coming over and working with Hogan. So I think hopefully I think this can be successful. I really don't I don't want to say I don't like Hogan per se. I mean, I can't take away from what he's meant for the business and as a businessman and all. I mean, some of the stuff he says is wacky. But hey, if this be successful, it potentially could give Vince a run for his money. However, I don't know. I mean, the name power will be good and all, but the only way it's really going to be successful is if it can get a strong television deal and pay-per-view, and that's just something right now that the Hulkamania promotion as a whole is not really, I guess, looking into. They're just looking at doing shows and potentially maybe expanding from Australia to North America and stuff like that. Moving along, I want to give my quick thoughts on the recent fight that was signed for UFC 105, which I believe is another free card in Randy Couture versus Brandon Vera. To me, this would be a very interesting fight in the fact that if Vera wins, this could make Vera a superstar. It depends how he wins. If he takes the decision and it's another fight like with Krzysztof Jasinski, which was kind of boring, where he had maybe a moment or two, but overall was more not really the best of fights, then that won't really help catapult Brandon Vera. But if he goes out there and has a performance where, like against Frank Mir, when Brandon Vera was started in the UFC back in the heavyweight division, this definitely catapults him because he's beaten like one of the biggest names the UFC has, and like the guy with the longest track record in the UFC right now. So that would be a huge thing. For Couture, I don't know if he really needs to have this fight. I mean, he signed a new contract. He could really just technically wait, but I guess he wants to get back out there, and or he feels he owes the UFC something, or the UFC feels he owes them something like that would have to be one of the reasons this fight is considered right now. Plus, it's a free show, which part of his new contract, like he gets certain amount of pay-per-view buy bonuses, and if it's a free show, which I think UFC 105 is, then that should be interesting. I think it's more that the UFC 105 they're trying to sell to the UK market, and they didn't really have a big headliner since they had Bisping, I think, who's on this card as well, but now they got Couture, who's loved everywhere. So that should be a good thing. I guess to wrap it up quickly, just give my thoughts on the Fight Night card, which is coming up tomorrow, as well as the Ultimate Fighter 10, which should be just fucking great. Let's just put it that way. Should be just an awesome season. If you haven't seen the first 8 minutes of the show, or that thing that the trailer was part of the first episode the UFC released on the Spike website, and now they put it up on their YouTube channel, go out of your way to find it. It just sets the tone for how awesome the season's going to be. But we'll start with the Fight Night card. I really think for a Fight Night card, these two fights are pretty good. And usually the Fight Night cards, they have a lot of interesting fights on it. I'll mainly want to stick here with the two main fights, which are Melvin Guillard and Nick Diaz, I should say. That fight, to me, is a little bit more interesting than I think a lot of people are looking into, as, Melvin Guillard, a guy who really, he was facing those cocaine charges, was out for a very long time. He comes back at the TUF 9 finale on the undercard and wins, some would say a controversial decision. I didn't really feel that was the most controversial one on that show. I felt the Brad Blackburn victory was the most controversial one. But the thing that impressed me about Guillard is his ground skills had vastly improved since I'd last seen Melvin Guillard. He was able to hang on the ground with Gleason Tebow, who's a very well ground fighter. So I'll give him props there. And he's in there with Nate Diaz, who loves the ground. He loves to throw that submission on there. The Diazes, they can go and on the ground and in the stand up. And I think this makes both. I see a mini version of carbon copies of both these guys, and it should be for another exciting fight. Who would I take in this one? I don't know. I really don't. Part of me just sees the fact that Nate Diaz needs a win badly, and he's just going to go out of his way to go get it. So I think that's why he really needs a win. And Guillard, I don't know if the UFC even really wants him in there. I think they're just trying to throw him in there with a couple of guys to get him a loss. I thought for sure he's going to go in there against Gleason Tebow, lose, and the UFC's going to be like, yeah, we're going to cut you now. That's basically the plan, but they couldn't do that. He got a win. Unfortunately, it was controversial in some people's eyes, but he got a win. So if here he loses, by submission or something, a knockout, whatever, I think the UFC will cut him. And I just think that Diaz needs this win more so than just really needs this win. He's on, a 2-3 fight losing streak. Really, he needs this win. And of course, we have Roger Huerta versus Gray the Bully Maynard. So battle between the Matador and the Bully. Really, I'm looking forward to this fight a lot, as Huerta always brings it. He always puts on an exciting fight, and this apparently this is going to be his last fight ever. I don't buy that for a minute, because if he doesn't make it in Hollywood, which I don't think I think that's actually going to happen. He won't make it. He maybe make it for 4 months tops, but that's about it. Against the Bully Maynard, and I don't really know where I see this one going. Part of me can see maybe Huerta just taking a dive, but that's not him. That's not in the Mexican culture. So the way I see this fight going is basically, Gray's going to want to take it to the ground. Just do what he kind of did with Jim Miller. Just, get him down and just control. And just that's basically the way he wants it there. I think that Huerta isn't the most skilled on the ground. Definitely Maynard's going to be the one in control there. And that's the way I see it, really. Just Maynard being the bully on the ground. And that's the way I see this one going. Should be a really, really good fight. I think, that I think it'll have its moments on the ground. I think that Huerta can get out of a couple of these exchanges, just a couple of them, but other than that, I think most of the fight will be dictated on the ground, and Gray Maynard will win. You also got Carlos Condit on here as well, so he's, very exciting fighter, and he had a great fight with Martin Kampmann on the last Fight Night card from Nashville, so this should be a really good night of fights. You got TUF 10, which is going to be awesome. Like I said, if you saw the first 10 minutes, it's going to be fucking great. I'm just excited for the season because, one, it's heavyweights. 2, you have, Evans and Jackson in there, and they're just jacking at each other, talking smack each and every episode and stuff like that. You have Kimbo Slice, who's a very combustible element. A lot of the fighters aren't going to like him. Rampage obviously likes him, and he's on the right team, in my opinion, for this show to have, create great interest. You have Rampage, who's a great personality. You have Kimbo, who was for a very long period of time, and maybe still to this day, more known than most fighters in the UFC, and that's a fact we have to look at here. And now he's going to be in the UFC. I think I don't believe he wins this. Really, I think it's Roy Nelson who obviously is going to take this. But I don't think the UFC is going to cut Kimbo. I think the UFC is going to realize, we can make Kimbo a headliner or not maybe a headliner, but a strong undercard guy in our TV shows. A free fight night cards or opening fight card on a pay-per-view, we can do that. It'll create interest. I mean, look at the money he's drawn in. Television rating wise, he was the most watched fight against James Thompson. So, gotta look at it that way. And I think that's the way the UFC is going to do it. But overall, I'm really excited for the show. Apparently, a lot of the antics on this show are from Rashad Evans and Quentin Jackson, obviously, but, Wes Sims, which should be just awesome. This is obviously the most excited I've been for TUF since probably 3, because you knew you were going to get combustible elements between Tito and Ken, and here you're going to get the same thing. But anyways, really, that's it for me. I'm out. Peace.